It's good to see everyone this morning. If you open your Bibles, please, to Ecclesiastes, the 6th chapter. We came to the point of question number 3, what did Solomon say is an evil disease? And that will be a good starting point for us to finish the chapter and go into chapter 7. So what was the evil disease that Solomon was one that saw and described for us? God gives us wealth. He gives us all these things. God giveth, but he says he giveth him not the power thereof to eat thereof. So he gives him he gives him riches, wealth, and honor. And we notice that Solomon had all three of those. God gave it to him. Notice God's giving and God's withholding. God is in control. Do you like that? We're talking about your food supply. We're talking about the necessities of living life. Is it all right to be in the hands of God? I'd rather be in the hands of God than any government upon the earth, wouldn't you? But what God is doing is that I oversee these things, and he tells us in James that we don't receive because we don't ask. And we don't, even though we ask, we're going to spend it in our righteous living, and therefore we don't get it. Who's in control of that? James tells us that life is fleeting, and we know it's just a little vapor. I understand that. But we should be saying that if God wills, we shall live and do this or that. Are you okay with that? Some people are not. In our modern time of humanistic thought, people are now wearing things, don't die. It's not, I'll overcome death in the resurrection. People don't believe God. People who have been in religious circles like the Mormons. There's a Mormon man, a beat here, and he says don't die, and he's taking hundreds of pills a day, and he looks like he's 45, and he has the heart of an 18-year-old. But he spends $1 million a year of opening it. You can see his progress. He looks young. But he also has the humility at this point to say, I could die coughing on all the pills I take tomorrow. But his point is, we've got to determine this because there's no evidence for a resurrected Lord. He's been a Mormon. And when humanistic beginnings to think to it, this is endeavor. This is a man's life work, and he's doing things with his children to idea avoid death. Don't die. We don't have to die. But what does the Bible keep telling us? It's appointed unto man once to die. Yeah, that's right. And Ecclesiastes, what are we going to end? We're going to get old, and there's the honor of getting old, having blossomed white hair and all of those things. But then our body goes to the earth. There's a separation of death. Our spirit returns unto God who gave it. He is in control. And so I don't have a problem with that because I still believe there's evidence for the resurrection of Christ. And Jesus left behind that evidence, and God planned it so we would have objective evidence. He had eyewitnesses, a bunch of them, that could have lived, but they're dead now. So what is our goal? We're now not going to overcome death, we just don't die. So if you exercise enough, maybe just an hour a day, and if you take the right pills, vegan diet, by the way, if you do all of that, then you're going to lower the rate of your aging. And he's proven that to be true, that we can lower that. Now he's trying to get negative. He's trying to reduce it back where he'll stay the same. Well, he's on a journey. I think it's futile. And to turn away from God is foolish. So we're not in that mindset. We realize there is a God. Evidence still points to that. And we realize that we're going to die. So we live this life. What are we going to get out of it? God didn't just talk to us about heaven in Christ. He tells us here in Ecclesiastes about life under the what? The sun. Life here on earth. And the wisdom that we have before us. Now what is interesting and challenging to me, I hope it's always interesting to you, and is the fact that one of the things about studying the scriptures verse by verse, you have to think in the channel that God is directing us. We may have our ideas and we come across something we may not understand, but we go back over it. What was the author, inspired by God, trying to say to us? And what happens is that God will take us on areas of thought that we never thought about before if we had not read the passage. And we're going to see some things here that may be a little difficult. Some are not. You may say, well, that's the reason for his writing this. And no, I think this is the reason of that. But see if he doesn't explain it. And that's where I found that a lot of times if we just look at before and after a verse that we're having a problem with, he's maybe explaining what that his thought was, and it takes you in an area that you hadn't thought about before. That's growing in the wisdom of God, not the wisdom of men. You'll be looking, well, yeah, that's a wise person. How do you ever figure that out? Well, I got it from God. And I got it from studying the scriptures and embracing verse by verse studies that we do in order to expand my mind according to the mind of God. And so we're studying the Bible and not some popular author right now. We're studying God's mind, and he's revealing it to us. So we see here, what was the great disease? Well, so that he lacketh nothing for his soul of all that he desireth, yet God giveth him not the power to eat thereof, but who eats it? A foreign enemy comes and takes it away, takes the land away, takes the food away. He said, this is an evil disease. God gave it, gave you wealth and honor. He gave you all these things, and all of a sudden, he seemed like he takes it away. But he took it away. He can take it away because things happen on earth. God allows it. And God sometimes on purpose brings it because he tells us so. So I know he can do that. Why he's doing it at a certain time, can't tell you. My mind is to consider things because Paul said in the days of prosperity, rejoice. In the days of adversity, consider. Consider maybe this is punishment for my sins. Maybe this is to wake me up to something that's more important. All of these things can be happening. That helps us understand why this is happening without blaming God or feeling sorry for ourselves. So we're seeing here that this happens. Do nations come in, especially in this time where they would conquer other people? They would dwell in their houses. They would overcome their land and take over their land. That was a big wealth project for invading armies to have that ability. And so he's speaking about that. Indeed, that is an evil disease. And then he just keeps going on the thought. And this is where we want to start this morning. With question number 4, why is it man who begets many children and lives many years is worse off than one who is stillborn? I hadn't thought about that lately, have you? I don't like to think about babies being born dead. So we just stay away from it. No. For this class, this moment, this is where we are. So how do you answer that? Well, what does the Bible say? We're in Ecclesiastes, the 6th chapter. And we're looking at verses after verse 3 when one comes in. So at verse 3, if a man beget 100 children, no wonder he's in trouble. No, he beget 100 children. That's a blessing. Quiver full of them. Oh, it's a blessing. If a man beget 100 children, he said if, didn't say did, if, and live many years, just to emphasize that, so that his days of his years are many. He was fruitful. He lived many years, had many days to enjoy the kids, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And moreover, he hath no burial. Well, we look back in the times and say, well, they didn't. That's a terrible thing. Nobody mourned you. Nobody buried you. You just left out in the fields. Sometimes people were. But this is the point. And hath no burial. So he had children, lived many years, but at the end, he's not honored. Let's put it that way. He has no burial. He has no honor. He says, I say that an untimely birth is better than he. Okay. What does verse 4 say? That answers that. You may have your ideas, but see, I want us all to think, far. We talked about thank God for the gars last week. Here we are. Far. That's the Greek word is where we get our word gar. But it's the idea of far. That's always a key I'm explaining what I just said. And sometimes we stop and say, oh, okay, because he's seen the light of day and ends in dishonor, and the stillborn doesn't see the light of day. Would you say that's a pretty good idea? Yeah, it's possible. Well, just exactly what does God say? For he cometh in vanity. We've seen vanity means there's no substance of that because it's fleeting. You can't hold it. It's changing. For it, the untimely birth, cometh in vanity, and departeth in what? He didn't see the light of day. He departs in darkness. In fact, his whole being was in darkness. In the womb. And he's stillborn in darkness. And the name thereof is covered with what? With darkness. Sometimes, miscarriage is happening. Sometimes, I know there was a baby, but sometimes the name's not given. But even if one was, how are they remembered? All they experienced was darkness. So it's covered, his name, what he stands for. A lot of times the name denoted the character. What characterized them? Darkness. Never got to see the light of day. Oh, I think we're right. Moreover, it hath not seen the sun. That's why darkness, light of day concept. Nor known it, nor experienced it. Didn't do that. But he said, this hath rest. The stillborn has rest rather than the other. And then he doubles down on something. Yea, though he live 1,000 years twice. Just said many years here, but 1,000 years twice. You get 2,000 years. And yet enjoy what? No good. He didn't enjoy good. He did not enjoy good. So what was all of this time spent doing? And we see chapter 5 leads up to this. Verse 19, let's get what life under the sun was supposed to be. Every man also whom God hath given riches and wealth. That's what we saw in chapter 6 about Solomon experiencing that too. He's given riches and wealth and have given him power to eat thereof. He just told us sometimes we don't have the power to that, and that's an evil disease. But no, he gave us the power to eat thereof and take his what? Take his portion. That becomes important in the next few verses. Takes his portion. Maybe each day take his portion. Live each day realizing that here's what I get out of the day. He takes his portion, and to rejoice in what? In his labor. He didn't say rejoice from the fruits of his labor. That's true. But just rejoice in his labor, knowing that the end of the thing is better than the beginning. Something's better. But the point is that here is something you can rejoice in because you see the end thereof. And if you never expended the labor, you'll never get there. I've learned over and over and over again, it doesn't get done till you do it. You can talk about doing it. You say, I plan to do it. We do that a lot. But what a wonderful thing to see it done. And that's your portion in life. That's what life is under the sun is about. So now he talks about when it's taken away from you, and then he gets down to the point of comparing a stillborn to one who doesn't rejoice in his labor. And what's the final nail in this thought that we're striving to grasp? Do not all go to what? One place. That baby born dead never went through the trials of life, never got to enjoy the sun, but never went through the experiences of life, whether to do it wisely or unwise. But here's a person that lives 2,000 years, and maybe he has 200 kids, whatever, but it does not enjoy the good that comes in his life. And we're going to see in chapter 7 why that is important, why that even says sorrow will bring something good sometime. Because we're going to laugh again and be happy again. And so I think he's just striving to set forth the fact that you went through all this lengthy life. So I will not die, I will live 1,000 years, modern man. But you don't enjoy the good that you have. You had to take those pills, you had to take that exercise, you had to have them testing your blood, you had to have infusion from the blood cells of your son, that helps you repair. And we go through all of that. May die of a heart attack, may choke to death on pills. He understands that. But that's what he's striving to do. What happens with knowing the hands of God, this is how he tells us to live. Isn't that really the accumulation of your days? That's what life's about. Enjoying the good, that's what we get out of life. Because what place are we going to? The stillborn has died, and we had his or her funeral. We buried. But you live all that time and you don't have honor at death with a burial. You didn't enjoy good every day that you lived. You just labored over, maybe you had riches and you just worried about them, as we talked about. What stillborn's bad. That one never saw the sun but is rested. It didn't say it doesn't exist. It rests. And you went through life not resting, but you end up at the same place. What was good in your life? You weren't honored at the end. You didn't enjoy the good throughout your life. But boy, I lived 1,000 years plus. But you enjoy no good. What's the lesson? What I need to be thinking about when I compare that who's never seen the dawn of the day, the sun, and experienced that, and they've died. What a tragic thing that is. We all feel sorry for them. Who do you feel more sorry for? Me, if I don't start enjoying my portion this day. And realize look at that good. Look at what I can do, not what something's done to me, but what I can do to deal with this. So that's set forth in our now. How would you describe that? And put that in a phrase is the fact that indeed it may not have seen the light of day, but it has rest. And now you went through all your life with no honor, and you're going to the same place. And yet you had no rest during your days because you didn't enjoy the good. And that's what he keeps saying throughout the book, to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Sometimes he's told enjoy your labor. Because it's something that is essential. Any thoughts you might have on that? Show that contrast. And it's something we don't normally think about. But you're forced to do that this morning with me, and I appreciate that. Any thoughts? Any confirmation? He suffered. He didn't end it though, did he, by himself? So God blessed him double on that. So that's God. He's in God's hands, and we're never told that Satan wanted to test him. God allowed it, but that's how the story unfolds. And we need to realize God does test us. He doesn't tempt us to sin. James tells us that, but he tempted Abraham. He tested him, wasn't tempting him to sin, but tested him. And we may realize, that's a test. How am I going to take care of it in a godly way? What can I enjoy the day while I'm going through the test? What am I going to learn? What can I open my eye into that instead of woe is me? And God gives us a mindset to deal with the injustice in this world. And that's why this study is so good. So let's continue, because this idea hasn't ended yet. Where's the one place all go? We all go to the grave, and the Hebrew term denotes Sheol, which is the place of departed spirits. Our body is laid in a grave or a tomb. goes back to the dust from which it was made. All those things because God was there through all of this. And this is the way God has dealt with sin. Yeah, it's because of death. So we all go to one place. And what's going to happen? Where did Jesus go when he died? Where was his spirit? Peter will preach that. Where was his spirit when Jesus died? It was in Hades. But Hades is not going to keep him because that was not going to happen. So what happens, our spirit is connected back with the body, and therefore we've conquered death. Death is only a separation. It's back there. And we live again, but this is where we go. Now, there's some that teach today among our brethren that we go straight to heaven. I'd rather depart and be with the Lord. Where's the Lord? He's in heaven. Got Luke 16. Well, that's before Jesus' death and resurrection. When he was raised, he opened up heaven, and we all go straight to heaven. Well, Paul will talk about in 2 Corinthians 5 about himself and realize that I don't want to remain naked, just with having a spirit and no body. He's looking for the resurrection. He walks by faith. And so I don't hold being with Christ, being in his comforting place, I think we will. He's not, the presence of him. Abraham's bosom is a sense of the comforting that God gives us in the Hadean world, separated from the Hadean world where the fires are tormenting people already, and it's not hell yet. We've determined when we die, we may not have a proper burial. The rich man may have had his funeral, but there may not have been a burial for a poor man. But I tell you, the angels come and take him to a place of honor, of comfort, while the rich man is suffering torment. The day we die, we're ushered into that realm, that spiritual realm. We know, we think, we remember, we're not sleeping. And that's what Luke 16, that's what Jesus taught us there. He opened the curtain to understand what happens after death. So I still think we go to a place of comfort, in that sense, be in the comforting presence of the Lord. I know, that's not taking a literal, I'm going straight to heaven. But the whole point is when we're then raised from the dead, the judgment, he'd take us straight to heaven. We've got that where we're ushered in. So people might argue where we go, but the author here said, we'll go one place. And that's the grave, is what they would be thinking about. We all die. So what about life under the sun? The stillborn didn't get to see that, but he's better off than the one who had the opportunity and didn't take advantage of it. Now, we're supposed to enjoy the labor. We've seen that in chapter 5, in chapter 6, and we've seen the refrain all through here. But all the labor of man. So why does one labor? So why do you work? I never think I labor to work. Labor to eat. See, I can't even think of it. I don't think of that. Well, save or spend, pay the bills, pay for the mortgage, all those things. I never think about eating, but how true that is. Why do we have so many restaurants around here? Because everybody has to eat, right? And we have gardens and we can have things, but we have to have food in order to what? To live. We cannot live without eating. And so he's just getting down to the very basis, our closeness of our laboring, our working, is so we can nourish our bodies by feeding our mouths with food. So all the labor of man is for his mouth. And yet, what do we see in question number 7? What is never filled? Our appetite. What does it mean? I had too much to eat today and I'm not hungry. What's going to happen tomorrow? Hey, is that pizza still in there? Let's have it for breakfast. Why? I'm hungry. Your appetite is never filled. Well, it is too. I've filled up my 3 meals a day and I'm done. What's going to happen 8 hours later? it's never going to be fully satisfied. So what do? I keep working. What do? Well, I'm laboring for a purpose. And if a man will not, what? Work, neither let him, what? Eat. It's just the two things are together. And so his appetite is not filled. So now we take another little work, and this doesn't necessarily hit you that way. Why is this? Why does he say it this way? I'm reading from the American Standard. Your newer versions may have it's another way. A lot of them do, but it'd be good for discussion. For what advantage hath the wise more than a fool? Well, we've seen earlier it's better to have wisdom than a fool. Wisdom's in his head, and fool is never going to have anything of substance. So it's better to be wise than a fool. So what advantage? What advantage hath the wise more than the fool? Or what hath the poor man? Notice what he has. The poor man doesn't have a lot. The poor man that knoweth how to walk before the living. I don't have a lot, but I'm being wise, though I'm poor, because I'm enjoying the fruits of my labor every day that I live. That would be the train of thought of Ecclesiastes. We'll start there. He knoweth how to walk before that, so I can be wise, and I know I may be wise and rich, but I can be poor and know how I ought to live life under the sun, which makes me wise like Solomon. And so he said, what advantage hath the wise more than the fool? Some say, not because he has a worldly wisdom. And it's not the true wisdom of God. I don't think there's anything that would indicate that, because he has the poor man, he does walketh wisely among the men. He knoweth how to walk before the living. So I want to put those two together. So I'm asking, why is a wise man and a poor man who lives properly before his fellow man have not advantage over the fool? I'm looking at what advantage, and that's a rhetorical question. There's not any. Now you say, well, there is. Let's try to find it. It's open. Tell me. A fool, the guy who knows how to live life under the sun and he's poor, I have more advantage than that. He didn't have advantage over me. What is the train of thought that sits there and says, this is what he wants me to think about? That's what this passage is saying, because there are all sorts of views on this passage. David? They're made equal. He has said that we all go to one place. That's very true. And he's added the labor and the idea of appetite. So we lose our appetite at death and we don't work anymore. I understand that. But let's just think about the labor in connection with the appetite. And we know the appetite is what? It's never satisfied. It never ends. Fool, wise man, poor man, we all have to eat. Why? We get hungry. Now, the wise man knows how to live life under the sun. He may have a lot of land and get a lot of food. The poor man doesn't have much, but he labors for his daily bread. And he gets that. And the fool, they all get hungry. And the appetite is never satisfied. So what advantage, see, what, as we'll see in the last, in chapter, where we saw in chapter 3, what profit hath the man under the sun? It's a time to be born and a time to die, time to plant, a time to pluck up. What profit means, where did you get ahead in all this? Because in reality, in the end, we're laboring for our food, and we're never satisfied with our food. So what happens when he says, verse 9, better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of our desires. So that's our question now. But we're still in that channel. So I think we got this. Better is the sight of the eyes. I'll get the cabbage and the corn. I'll get the grade. That's something I can do. I have control of that today. I'm going to get the herbs, and we're going to have a meal. Or the wandering of the desire. I would like this. I would like that. How can we get this? And you never have a plan. You never get around to getting that done. He said, this also is a vanity and a striving after wind. There's no substance of that. So he's still talking about the idea of satisfying the appetite for the day. It's never going to be completely satisfied as long as we live. Death is still the equalizer of it all. But I think he's just still striving to say you enjoy the fruits of your labor at the moment. Not wishing it'd be better. Not having a great dream out here that you're not making plans to get there. It's just a dream. And you spend all your time worrying about how your money's stacking up, who's going to take it next, and all those things. We've seen that here. But this very basic necessity of life, of eating, in order to live, it's true. And so what he's saying that we all have those appetites that never get filled. So we all need to keep laboring. And in our labor, we need to enjoy the good from that. Now, if you were just a psychologist and a therapist, wouldn't that be positive thinking? Would that be, I need to be looking at each part of my life and enjoy what the good I'm seeing around. And if I can't see good, I need to find a way to see what is happening that's good. Maybe it's just a test. Maybe I'm getting stronger. That sort of thing. I could rejoice in that. But God is not a psychiatrist or a therapist. He's a God that is teaching us how that we should live life under the sun. So we come to question 10, and we says, whatsoever hath been, the name thereof was given long ago. And it is known what man is, neither can he contend with him that is mightier than he. Seeing there are many things that increase vanity, what is man the better? For who knoweth what is good for man in his life? All the days of his vain life, which he spendeth as a what? As a shadow. We'll come to that in a moment. For who can tell a man what shall be after him under the sun? Here's these questions. And when I read that, should man be humbled by anything? When you read that? Well, I came up and I've invented this. Well, it has a name to it. It's long ago. It's been done before. It was given long ago. A name was given to that. You know, we identify things with names. It's already here. And whatsoever hath been, the name there was given long ago. And it is known what man is. Neither can he contend with him that is mightier. So I would ask, if it's a person, who might that be? Yes, sir. I got you. Thank you. Who is the person that would be behind this? Knows what man is. Long before had a name to it, before we came across it. Who's going to be able to tell us what's going to come after we leave? Who can do that? God, right? And he's trying to bring us to the point, you're going to contend with God? Job, you tried. You had your contention with him. You realized that you sinned because of your words and so forth. But all of that was a given that says, I don't know everything. It's a humble experience that we have because God is indeed behind this. Look at 1 Corinthians 2, and we can see some passage from the Old and New Testament why I believe it points to God who knows things before we do and brings things into being. Paul says in 1 Corinthians, the first chapter, in verse 28, he takes the base things of the world and the things that are despised did God choose, yea, and the things that are not, that he might bring to naught the things that are. He takes the things that are not and brings to naught them that are not. That's God. And they're not even there yet. But he brings those things to naught of what man, he sees man doing. And they haven't been invented yet by anybody. He already has done that. Jeremiah 1:5. Jeremiah was known pretty early on and what God had planned for him. Jeremiah 1:4, the word of Jehovah came to me saying, before I formed thee in the belly, where he's completely formed and be born, I knew thee. I, God, knew thee. And before thou comest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee. Paul was sanctified from the womb to be a witness for God and to be involved in preaching the gospel. Paul will deal with that in Galatians 1 and verse 15. But here Jeremiah, for I came forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, I have appointed thee a prophet unto the nations. So before God comes into, before things come into existence, God already has got them. He's already got them named, and man named the creation. I realize that. But here God brings these things into existence. The humility is, it may have already had a name with it before. I just thought of it. Well, who am I? Well, it's probably a name before. But who knows us? John 2 and verse 25, Jesus would not allow himself to be made a king because he knew men. Verse 24. But it also says he knew what was in man. Do you know what's in man? Oh, you may assume you know, and that's your lack of humility. But we don't know how to read hearts. We're not to judge motives. And we see that becomes important in our living, but who knows our hearts? There's nothing hid from God with whom we have to do. He knows our secrets. And we understand that from God. God is the one that does that. So there is knowing man as he is important that we turn to God. How to live life from the Son, enjoy that portion. And we're seeing him drive home that point of the idea of realizing there's a God in existence and he's in control. And so he closes that sixth chapter with us understanding God. And we say, well, I didn't read about God being there. But he's asking those rhetorical questions so that we could understand that. Any thoughts that you might have before we come to an end? Who can tell a man what shall be after him under the sun? Who told us about what happens when we die? Jesus. And he's the only one that tells us about hell. I mean, one of the writers talks about it, but 11 out of 12 times Jesus is talking about it. A place we've never seen, but he's warned us about it, hadn't he? He tells us what happens after we leave the wonderful thing of being under the sun. Enjoy every day you live and realize that that's your portion in life. Enjoy the fruits of your labor. Enjoy what you accomplished for good. And that's the wisdom of men. And that's why we study the book. Thank you for being here and participating.